to reach out to their separately, and then we'll certainly be able to talk through anything that comes up. So the first thing it looks like we have on our agenda is to work on some sped funding update and discussion.
Okay. When we last met back in December, I had dire news on the sped tuition front. I wish I could sit here today and say it's any better. And in fact, it's probably a little bit worse. Before I get into some of the numbers and break them down, Chairwoman Underhill reached out to two of our elected officials, and Mr. Conroy and I met with both James Arena DeRosa and Senator Becca Rausch last Friday. They were good meetings. Unfortunately, I'm not sure we're going to see any relief. Correct me if I'm wrong. The impression I get is you should reach out to the governor's office. You should reach out to other people, but it doesn't look like there's an emergency funding package coming at all. Both the senator and the rep stated clearly that everyone was approaching them. There were a couple towns still that had not approached the senator. Everyone is in the same position. It's all relative. So where I was hopeful, and I think it was important to do that. We're doing our due diligence. We have one more meeting to set up, and we do have to work with, at least for us, the Mass Association of School Committees is looking to do some advocacy, but I just don't think we're running out of clock here, and I just don't see anything coming out of the state unless it's an act of God. I mean, I could be wrong unless you have a.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Yes. So we actually, Mr. Kaczynski, Ms. Bray DeMarzo, and I actually met with Marcus Vaughn, James Arena DeRosa, and Becca Rausch again on Monday. And this topic did come up. Similar feedback was given. It was stressed very, very strongly that we get letters out as soon as possible to the governor, because I think she finalizes her budget around March 1st.
Okay.
So as soon as possible to get that word to them that we need emergency funding for this.
Yep.
And they also did stress getting other communities in similar positions to write those letters, flood them with letters. And now is the time to do that. So that's the best we could get. We did ask if there were other funding sources right now that they could predict we could get something from, and that didn't appear to be the case. So
We asked several times.
yeah.
We asked backwards, and then we took a pause and then asked again. And then asked them to go to the governor's office, and we said, write some letters.
Yeah.
But not that it helps in the situation that we're in, but at least we've done what we can do. It doesn't end the problem, but we just didn't sit back. So we're going to prepare a letter.
Yeah, and Senator Rausch, I mean, when we met with Senator Rausch, she did say, and same with Representative DeRosa, you know, there are definitely people looking at the circuit breaker formula, but Senator Rausch was pretty confident that there's not going to be a change to the formula this cycle. So the only funding that we would get is if they come up with some emergency funding mechanism that the governor could potentially put in. Otherwise, the legislature would have to do it. But again, that's not chances are it's not coming before town meeting. And you know, the other thing we did express to her was we also would very much, for Millis's sake, not want that money to be just run through a generic Chapter 70 formula or whatever, because those formulas divert money based on various factors that ends up in Boston and Springfield. And we said, if you're going to do something emergency based, it needs to actually tie to all the communities, so people are so we're getting it to the, you know, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, you know, just in the 14% increase. I think that resonated. The 14% increase resonated with them both. But again, we're on a clock that doesn't match up with theirs.
So just put a little more context, and the number has not really fluctuated. As we sit here tonight, based on the enrollment of kids under special education going out of district, right now, we have 20 are out of district placement. We have outside of out of district, which means they're going to a school where there's a tuition attached to it. We have another student who is attending Bridgewater State University. We have 3 students participating in extended evaluations. And based on the conversation we had last night, those 3 are most likely going out of district in next year. And then we have 1 student move in as of the 13th, so Monday. So we're gonna have 2 kids age out, but our new net is gonna be 4. So there's really no break at all. We're going from 20 to 20. So we're not seeing in years past, kids would age out and 2 or 3 would age out, and that would help. We're not seeing it. So we're basically staying the same. On top of that, we have a 14% increase. Oh, well, let me just give some numbers. So 603, and at some point we're going to prepare a letter, so we'll have more numbers, so something to react to. But we have 603,460 an out of district tuition increase. Okay, that's an increase. So that increase is broken down by the 14% tuition increase and then new students going out. Okay, 300,127 for special education teachers additions and increase, and I'll explain that. 241,317 for paraprofessional additions and increase. I'll explain that in a moment. Actually, let's stop there. So even though the crux of the increase is out of district tuition, we are also and worked very hard as over the last several years to keep kids in district. So we have increased our resources, our staffing around that issue. So kids come into the district, they get an IEP. There's mandates that it's a 1-for-1 para. We increase the number of kids on IEPs in the district. We need to increase our capacity of teachers and paras. So this tuition is not going out of district. It's to basically try to keep as many kids as possible in district, not for cost savings, because we feel as a district that the highest quality education is within our own district, and we want to keep them in district. At certain times, though, the plans propose and really mandate that they go out of district, but it's helped us improve education and the quality of the education of some of the kids involved. There gets to a point, though, we can't keep them in district and they go out, and there's a significant cost. So I just want to be clear that even though our initial conversation was about out of district, it's really all under the umbrella of SPED, which is roughly, just to repeat, roughly 25% of our overall budget is SPED related. And that fluctuates a little bit, but that number has been fairly consistent. So a significant portion of our budget is SPED related, and will continue to be SPED related. And in fact, the numbers are starting to creep up of other kids in some early intervention, and where if not for our tiers of support, which is at 3 different levels, we'd be in a much worse place. But the numbers are not trending in the right direction. So then, in addition to, in order for the kids going out of district, we have to look at vans, 2 new vans for $100,000. And attached to the vans is fuel, about $67.88, and then new drivers and transportation cost. Okay, so part of that is some kids who are going out of district, it's written in their IEP, there only can be 1 person in the van. Whenever possible, we put 2 kids in a van, but it doesn't always work. Schools are in different directions, there's different times, different programs. We always, when possible, can put them together, but a lot of times some of these kids have 1 van driver, and that's their sole job. They have a van attached to the driver, and they're taking the kid to school and then back from school. So we're looking at $1,343,787. $1,343,000, 480, I'm sorry, 787. I just want to reiterate, and the committee has had multiple conversations about this. And we had a lengthy conversation last night. If we can't make up this deficit, that 1.3 million, I want to go 1.4, I'll be
Well, it is less than 50.
thoughtful, yeah.
Right,
I'm going technical, I'm
There
going
you go.
technical increase. If we can't meet this $1.3 million, it will have a significant and incredibly detrimental impact on the district, because the only way we will be able to make up that deficit is the loss of staff. And rough estimates is 10% of our staff. We're not, and we are not saying something that we're not throwing this out there. The rough estimate, if we have to make up this deficit, because this is mandated services, this is not optional, we are going to, at least initially, lose potentially 10% of our staff.
And as Steve mentioned, 25% of our budget is related to sped. Well, that 25% is untouchable.
Right.
So really, the 10% is coming out of the other 75.
Yes.
So
And-
it's the magnitude of impact on this, the students, overall student population that this would impact is bigger than 10%.
Our class sizes in some cases could potentially double. We would run out of space wise, extra services, and we are and it would be from top to bottom, we would be impacting. It's not like we can eliminate our custodian staff or we can't eliminate drivers. We don't have enough drivers. Like as a committee, we are very concerned about this potential impact, and we were going to come here tonight. We have not started the process of really, because now this is out, right? We've talked about this. This is going to get out. People are going to watch it. People are going to hear it. And now everyone, the panic amongst the staff is understandable and concerning. And I wish I could have come back with a different number. I wish we could have gotten some recourse from the state. But this is also not just the 14% increase. That's a chunk. There's just a bigger issue with the funding coming out of the state for SPED and how much money the SPED budget has on our school. And that's plain and simple. So it started out as this, what are they doing with this 14% increase? Now, if they want to make that up, we would take it in a heartbeat, but it's a bigger issue. And we have cut and reduced expense lines. There's no wiggle. Our expense line is very small. I think our salary to expenses is, I think it's 90 to 10. And we have really gutted our expense line. So even if we wanted to gut it completely, we're not making that up. I mean, we're breaking the glass. We are in trouble. And I will take a breath.
Has there been any thought of the process of that 10% and the approach of how those expenses would be trimmed in terms of staff or departments or?
No. I mean, how we would meet the deficit.
Yeah,
Obviously, if we can trim expenses, we would trim expenses. We have always taken the approach of supplies, expenses, licenses, or whatever we can before staff. We
Gotcha.
always want to make our highest priority, because it's dominoes. We start removing staff,
Yeah.
we start eliminating staff, we start eliminating resources and tutoring and extra support. Guess what? The SPED issue becomes, we're just pushing it down.
Yeah.
I know you know this, but it's just,
Yeah.
we've been running this scenario through our heads and we are not. in a
But
good place.
there also reaches a point where you can't cut expenses. I mean,
Right.
we
I think
already,
we have.
right, like we had this conversation last year when we were looking at like, we know what our expense run rate is. And we know what inflation's been the last 2 years, and we're sitting here going, we're gonna manage on flat. But like, you're really getting less than what you got before. We've been on a budget freeze since the second day of school for expenses. Because, so, on paper, sure, you can keep making numbers smaller than they were the year before. Doesn't mean it's actually gonna work. And so then, what our process is we defer to the superintendent and the administrative team. They'll come with, a proposal to get to whatever number we tell them they need to get to. And we'll go from there.
Do you have any current vacancies, projected vacancies, and a hiring freeze in place? Or if you were to have any of those?
I don't think we have any retirements, so we're not seeing any retirement savings, which has helped us in the past. I don't think we have any vacancies. We're not high. I think there's one position and where another para came in. It was one para in one
lateral.
school. It was a
But we
wash.
don't have any positions that we don't need.
It's kind of I ask because it's a requisite question.
Sure.
Yeah,
If
but
you're-
yeah,
if
we
you're-
don't,
you're in
right,
We're in the position we're in, then you don't technically need an emergency basis, which you don't already have. That's the only reason that I asked it.
I don't, we've talked about this. I don't think we have any unfilled positions at this point.
And I think it's clear for everyone that this is not okay to lose staff like this. I mean, my 9-year-old already has 25 kids in his class. This just, I'll speak for myself, not the board, but this just cannot happen. It can't.
But
So-
I feel compelled to ask the question, whether I
Sure,
agree with it or
sure.
not, everybody needs to hear. In here and elsewhere, has that been looked at? It's low hanging fruit,
Any
really.
question can be asked. That's what this tri board is about. It's putting us in there. You may not like our answers, but
Right.
I don't think
I
there's any
understand.
question that's,
I like your answer. We don't have it. Look,
Some people may ask, what expenses are you referring to? The time, cutting you.
so you
No,
mean
I
the
know, but there are
reduction?
some people who might
The
not
reduction,
know.
the reduction will be staff. The vast majority, if we have to make up this $1.3 million, overwhelming majority will be staff going out the door. And I don't have an exact number. The expenses would, meaning the supplies,
That's what I was at, because
a
some people
tiny
may.
amount,
oh,
a tiny amount. And we're not really in a good position to do that because as Mark said, we've been on a hiring freeze. We made deficits up in the last couple of years. We haven't increased our expense line.
Well, what I'm saying are teachers bringing in things that they don't have anyway, so.
We've worked around the supply thing. It's we will get to this deficit without any additional funding, only by reducing staff.
Can I ask, excuse me, can I ask just a clarification question? The 1.3 million, is that above and beyond 4% increase?
No, that's our operating budget. We're saying, yes,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
So our budget, our contracts, all that is within 4%. It gets it right around 4%.
Okay, so this is
So
beyond
this-
that.
Yes.
This 1.3 million is above 4%.
So this is what we need. 4% based on, the 4% covers the operating budget. and
Plus
then
1.3.
Plus 1.3. 43,787 for the tax.
You already gave that away, you can't get it back.
By 1.344.
I know this is not good news. I know there are needs on the town side. But we have an obligation to come here and put facts on the table and not be overly dramatic, but just to be clear of what I'm shuddering at the thought of making those decisions. And less about us making decisions, more about the impact. That is gonna impact from preschool to 12th grade and everything in between, in every building, in every facet of our education. And if I'm speaking out of school, feel free to correct me, but I think we had this very difficult conversation the last couple meetings.
I think our next step is to find out what the revenue is, and then, and just as we asked about cutting expenses, knowing that's not a popular or possible. If the new revenue isn't enough to cover this and the municipal needs, because the municipal has needs also. Somebody's got to start talking about, increasing funding, and the only way to do that is operational overrides, which we've done. Mark, when's the last time we did an operational override? It's 15 years.
We lost in 11.
2011 it lost, and I think we did one prior to that, 2008 or something. So we've gone a very long time prior to having any operational overrides. I'm not saying it should be considered first, but let's see what the revenue numbers are, because if you're cutting 10% of the teaching staff, and let's say we have operational revenue that covers half of that, from the new growth because of all the new growth we've been having and everything else that's going on. We got to put all the options on the table because it's important for the voters to make that decision. It's not gonna be a decision that comes out of this room. The best we can do is propose a solution, and the two solutions are drastic cuts or request additional funding if we don't have it coming in from new growth. So until we get the new growth number, there's not a whole lot of discussion that needs to be had. I except to bring it to our attention.
Sure.
We're not gonna solve it tonight, because if new growth comes in, negligible, and not just new growth, but growth over the prior year, not just the new growth that's occurring this year, but we had a lot going to free cash last year. So if that money doesn't roll in high enough, then there's going to be a gap, and that's the gap that has to be discussed.
For perspective, last year, we funded the shortfall via free cash, correct?
We
Yes.
use, we,
Yes.
We use free cash.
free cash, yeah,
About
We use
600,000.
361,000.
300.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let me,
The 600 is because they also got marijuana money for about 200,000.
So what's
That's
the-
what you're thinking.
Going forward, I know we carried a balance out of town meeting, fall town meeting. What's the free cash
So the
numbers?
free cash number is 1.1 million, but 271,000 of that is marijuana HCA money.
Yeah.
So leaves a balance of 800,000.
And how much of that 800 is must pay, is already spoken
Right
for?
now, we only have what we would consider for unpaid bills.
Yeah.
Um,
And
we
and
do-
on top of
maybe-
that, though, let's not forget that $2 million that free cash came in was made up of revenue, taxation revenue that was high, or new growth that was higher than estimates.
Right.
So that's going to hit,
Yep.
and then we've got new growth this year that's going to hit. So there's a number. I'm not
Right.
saying the number's large enough yet, but there's a number that takes this from a $1.3 million problem to a
But, okay,
something else
but can I just
lower.
Just one thing, you're talking about cuts, right, the drastic cuts. What about not so drastic cuts? I mean, you're looking at cuts, just not to cover the whole 1.344,
We need a balanced budget.
but if you could get this number,
So once we know what the number is,
right,
we'll
you'll figure it out.
know how much we have to cut.
Yeah.
But,
I was thinking of going
the
the other
number's
way.
not big before we get to people.
Yeah.
Right, I was thinking of going the other way with it.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, since I don't know percentages, but 80, probably north of 80% of the budget's staff.
Salary.
So you're really, there's not much left. If copy machine.
No,
paper-
I'm talking.
We'll look at
staff.
those
Yeah,
expenses.
yeah.
Okay. what do
No,
you
I'm
got?
looking, so I know you're looking, I might be reading this completely wrong, not the first time, won't be the last. You're looking for the town, I think, to give you what we can give you, and then you can figure out the rest. I'm asking you, can you look at some staffing cuts? I mean, nobody likes to say it, but not to cover the 1.3, but what could you maybe live with that wouldn't devastate the school system? And then we
So-
can look at what we could backfill. You know what I
So-
mean? It's a different way of doing it.
So there are, it kind of goes to Peter's question about do we have vacancies? That's the
Yeah,
kind of
but
approach.
no.
No, but
I know what you mean.
we don't have
Okay.
anything extra. There is no. There
Okay.
are
They're at the
no.
bare bones as
I
far as
get that.
staffing.
There's no staff that we can say, all right, we're just gonna let them go. And then come back and ask for $100,000 less.
Yeah,
Like that, there isn't any of those. And we've already, and again, and then you go to the non-salary stuff and it's
Right,
just,
it's
there's
not
just
there.
not there.
I get that
Can I,
part.
can I ask a technical question on it? When you're saying you need 1.3, is that assuming the 300,000 you got last year? Okay, so that, if that 300, so it's, okay, got it. Thank you.
So
300,000 is gone. It's freaky. It was freaky.
Well, no, but I'm saying if they were counting that in the
No,
base number.
No,
Yeah.
so this 103, so if you really, so really this 1.3 million. Includes the. If we were to get the 360 that we got last year.
Yeah.
This 1.3 number would be $1 million.
Right, so my question, the way I was phrasing that was, you didn't take the
Correct.
360.
We did not
and
factor that in. No, we
Yeah.
did not factor
Yeah.
that in.
So.
Good, that's
so
the
if
best
you're-
answer.
So your
Yeah.
base right now should be with 4%, should be 18,188,000. That should be your starting base. So you're saying your starting base, you need 1.3 million in addition to the 18 point.
Yeah.
say
that again.
So your starting base, if you took last year's and then took out the 361 and the HCA money, your starting base should be 18,188,000. And so what you're, and that's with the
4% more than
4%,
last year.
that's with the 4% in there. So that would be the starting base with the 4%.
And then the ACA money would be added back, but those are
Right.
targeted, so that can go to
Right.
general operations.
We went over those last
So,
night.
so your 1.8, that 18 is going to be increased by ACA, I'm sorry.
Whatever the
It's a separate
HCA's available
appropriation.
funding is, right?
I think that's the numbers I've got in my head in the
Right.
ballpark.
So.
So we
then
haven't
you-
had our budget hearing yet, but
Right,
this is always, we've been achieving this separate. The
Yeah.
4% gets us to where we need to go
Yeah.
with contractual obligations.
right.
Yeah.
And
And
then,
whatever slight increase.
and then you need the 1.3 in addition.
In addition.
Okay, what is, your circuit breaker, reimbursement going to be for the 24? Because you had the high circuit breaker, wasn't that the reason for the 361 last year? So you should be getting it back this
No,
year?
the reason for the 361 was because our total sped cost was going up, $500,000. The hope was that number was gonna go down. Instead of going down, it doubled. So,
Right, but you on the
but the
circuit
circuit breaker
breaker,
doesn't, so the circuit breaker, the increase in circuit breaker we're getting is minimal. If we were to get, so for instance, on this increase that we have for this year, for fiscal 24,
Mhm.
because circuit breaker pays a year late.
right,
Right.
right,
On the 1.3 million increase that we have, we're gonna get 172,000 from the state.
From
Next
last year.
Last year.
In 2025,
Oh.
we're gonna get, so even circuit breaker, and this is the point we made to the legislatures too, even in the current. Circuit breaker only covers 10% of our actual cost.
Yeah.
So, right, so,
You're right.
so when,
Right.
so when our costs go up $1 million, yeah, 2 years from now, the state's gonna give us 100,000 more. If that doesn't, we're still,
Is it always in the real-
municipalities are
it's not
still
gonna
on the
get
hook
us
for
there.
90%.
Yeah, and even if there is an increase based on what we spent in 23 that we'll get extra this year, it's negligible. It's not gonna be enough to make a dent in it. How much did you say is available for free cash that, this year? That's-
1.1 million.
so
No,
one, but
800 is
there's,
available.
it's 1.1 million,
Yeah.
but 271,000 is HCA money.
Right,
And then the balance would be 800,000 approximately,
Mhm.
that would be available for,
Yeah.
So
the
truly 800,000.
Springtown, yeah.
Is there,
Springtown meeting.
can we use more HDA money to go towards the schools? I know that you can only use it for certain programs, but
It's supposed to be, marijuana mitigation, you can't just take your money and put it
right.
over there because they need it.
benefit things that benefit the community. I'm just wondering if there's something that can, we
This
can
is
work
so
around,
awkward.
to use one.
I
to-
said,
you know
tell us
what I
about
mean?
the fire.
Out of HCA, maybe we can I don't know, take that money and put it towards something in school. I don't know, I'm just trying to
Well, the
think like.
school has
there's-
put in requests for marijuana money. I believe it's 30,000 more than they requested last year for funding through the marijuana money. So, I mean, I'm not the decider.
Right, right, yeah.
I'm just the person who collects the information, gives it out to people, and then they make decisions, and then it goes forward.
And just to be
So-
clear, I am not the decider.
Recuse herself on the board if she doesn't get paid the other way.
Teachers and staff that work at the school that live in Millis. This is
Right.
gonna affect more than just the
Right.
school and more than just the parents that
Right.
send their kids to school. This is affecting all of Millis.
We realize that, there's no one in this room that
That doesn't
minimizes
realize.
the seriousness of the situation. But we all have to keep level-headed and try not to let our emotions get involved with this, because we won't make good decisions. So everybody needs to know, what exactly do we need? What do we have available? And that everyone's going to have to make a decision.
What is the process for the school to make cuts? What's the?
So-
And I don't need to know like all the nuts and bolts, but the timeline is not, it's not like that either. So that,
So we have already asked the superintendent and the business manager to start identifying, they haven't brought anything to us yet. Start identifying staffing cuts and other cuts. So if we can make other cuts in expenses, we will do that. If we can, if our technology goes down, we're not gonna
I
ignore the
understand, but
expense line.
personnel cuts, usually there could be a RIF, there could be incentivized retirements or something like that. I don't know how they do it locally, but on the federal level, that's how it's done. There's offers made for retirements. It's almost like a corporate process, like a layoff.
I don't think we have any anticipated retirements next year, which was
Right,
away.
But my point is, if you're forced to make cuts, in a general term, how would you do it and what is the timeline? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? I
No.
mean,
It would be starting at the start of the school year. I mean, my kids are teachers.
Once
He's not
And
in yet.
And if it was, because the majority of our staff is under CBAs, the union, it's the contract will dictate who goes out the door. Bidding where we can go.
seniority.
And again, we don't have,
With
even
some
if
of
we were to
that.
incentivize people with, early retirements and buying out, those positions still would need to be filled. It would save, you
Yeah.
get marginal, because then you just gotta hire somebody back. We don't have positions that we can just get rid of. We don't.
I know, but it may.
I get it, but the idea, like, but we can't incentivize people to retire early, because
So
really we have to back.
the reason I asked is because I just want us to know that what we're talking about is it's not, you just said it, it's not one for $1, salary dollars equals dollars made up. Okay, there are some
You're gonna
extra,
save some.
there's time, there's money, that's not one for one. And the best case scenario is there's loosely $1.1 million available of free cash. Your need is 1.3. So right from the start, we're all $200,000 in the hole that we have to find another 200K out of the FY24 budget.
Yeah. and-
Unless there's some
Well,
sort
more than
of
that, because
revenue.
There are other
800,000
needs too.
available.
Correct. That's just for the school shortfall. There's other, correct. I understand.
But another piece of this is, listen, if this was a 1 year, you would say to us around this table, listen, we're gonna get out of this. Hold us
But we're
over
not
this 1
going
year, but it's every year. Last year you said, 350, we're gonna be good next year. Well,
Yeah, they-
so it's every year. So
We didn't say.
Yeah, they didn't say
Yeah.
We said we're gonna treat
We
it as
hope.
one time, right, we hope
We
it's
didn't say we were gonna be fine,
But
just
we
to be
really
clear.
need to, this is never gonna get better.
Bro, well, I don't know what the answer to that is. The answer is based on what our student population is
Every
and
year.
their needs and the mandates that we have to follow by law, legal
Right.
mandates.
Yeah.
This is not optional.
I know, but.
This
we-
is what's
has-
required.
Right.
Is, I guess my question would be, and I don't, it's uncomfortable to ask. If the schools have to cut, or is there municipal, do we have I hate to even ask, do we have
We are also
municipal?
at bare bones on the municipal side. We are at bare bones for staff right now.
Every, I mean.
We're not coming here and asking the municipal side to cut.
No, I'm not saying you.
No,
are.
I
I'm
think the
saying-
solution, I mean, my take on it is wait till we get
Yeah.
the revenue estimates. Assume that a large portion of the 800,000 of free cash will go to this, and it may not be a big capital year, just off the top of my head. And then,
Hope the state comes.
well, and then,
Don't do that.
I wish that's the last thing I would do.
It's not gonna help.
Yeah, and then, you know, then you're gonna need to find extra money. I'd like to see what the revenue estimates are. I'd like to assume that a large portion of the free cash, 800,000 is going towards the problem. Then it's an either override it, which nobody wants to say, but it's gotta be said, because it's the only other source of income. The only sources you got are the state, which is gonna give us a 0.01% increase in my bet. So there's my counting on the state. Override or the new growth, you know, and the new growth.
The
is-
select board just voted last year, before the fall town meeting to up the estimate of new growth, right? Do you
No.
guys recall that there was a shift in the new
That
growth?
was for 23.
That was
For
23, and we upped it by a few $100,000, which is not.
200,000.
So you'd have to have potentially, I understand what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, we up the estimate, up the estimate once, it's in the 23 budget. You know, that new growth is materialized. What's the projection
Well in
for
excess,
24?
well in excess, we upped it to. I mean, that was a very conservative number that we upped
Yeah.
it to.
So
So that's what I want to see.
So
and-
there's-
yeah.
Right, so
Yeah.
like that's a big question,
Yeah.
big number, because that was well in excess of what was put into the budget.
Right.
Which is why it flowed to free cash.
Right.
Which means we have a significant amount of money that was coming in regular tax revenue that wasn't applied to
Right.
anybody's operating budget. That money's still in there, and we're gonna have new growth on top of that.
Right.
That. And then all other expenses, you know, if we're maintaining at 4% for everything else, like.
Right.
There's,
I don't know that it says, I mean, it's not good news, obviously, but I think there's a path that can get you closer.
Yeah.
I think there's a path that's there. I don't think it's a well-lit, broad, easy to navigate path, but I think there's something that gets us into the ballpark of solvable.
What's the timeline for refining the new growth estimate?
Well, I would,
Total revenue.
yeah, I would just say we're gonna need, some of that is gonna be discussion between the administration and the select board about what that new growth number
Yeah.
is. So I expect that to happen over the next month. I would say that, as far as process, that we're still waiting for some pretty big numbers to come in, the health insurance numbers from the GIC,
Yeah.
as well as some other things that could swing the budget a couple $100,000 one way or another. So that's why it's hard for us to say today exactly what the size of the problem is. But I'd expect within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be getting some of that information.
so, town meeting's on May 3rd, correct?
Yeah.
Several weeks earlier than it has been.
So,
Not that, that's
Just-
not a criticism, it's just a
no,
statement. of
but
fact.
I'm sitting here, but if we're still 3 weeks away from a revenue number. Yeah.
I think we have to-
Well, I think we can
If override is gonna have to be on the
I think
If
the revenue
override is
number,
gonna have to be a topic of conversation, which I agree that it may be. We need numbers and we need them sooner than later, because if, then we have to articulate an override, whether it's just for school or there's municipal and school needs on, and we have to get that out. And we have to start communicating, we have to start letting the community know what we're
Right.
doing. We don't have 6 weeks to sit here and wait for numbers.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for the finance director because she's working on those numbers and we had some discussion earlier this afternoon about that. I think we probably could have an estimated revenue number for the select board's next meeting, which I think is the 27th. But there's still some factors that'll be floating out there that we won't be able to nail down exactly. Whether we'll have some of those key expense numbers by that date, I'm not sure, so we'll have to put in some estimates into that.
I
if
mean,
that's
my
the
take
case.
on it is, we're not looking to get a balanced number that we're submitting for certification. I mean, if you want to assume health insurance grows by 14%, which
Whatever
is
needed.
an absurdly high number, I think we're safe there. I haven't seen it that high anywhere. That was the worst of it. But if we're gonna take,
Special ed, actually,
I'm sorry,
14%, that's how high it is with special ed. So I know you just,
no,
but like.
for
that's-
health insurance.
I know, but
Yeah.
you said that was
No,
an
but-
absurd number, but that's what
Well,
we're dealing with. the
For, I
absurd.
mean, that's a certain number for health insurance in
For
today's
health
market.
insurance.
In today's market,
Yeah.
it's been running close to 6, yeah.
That would be 8, I would
But
guess.
it's a big number. So
Conservative
if we put in
Yeah.
14%, if we put in, most of a 4% growth for both of the base budgets, because honestly, everybody's done a very good job meeting that. Look at what the revenue we brought in last year in excess of, estimates for the new growth, what that rolled into free cash, what that was. Take the estimates for this year for free cash, you can get a new growth, you can get a number that's gonna put us, because if we walked out here and said we got a $250,000 problem overall, we're not going for an override. If we
Right.
walk out here and say we got an $800,000 problem, we're going for an override. That's what we're kind of trying to get in the ring.
Yeah, I was just kind of
Yeah.
thinking the same thing in terms of philosophically, you would look at free cash first.
Yeah.
Then can't we take, I mean, reserve fund isn't really for that, but what about stabilization?
Stabilization, there's a number that, again, there's a number that makes you say we need to go for an override, and there's a number that says you don't. And that's what we need to know.
And to Ellen's
Yeah.
point though, too, there's also a number of. The fact of the matter is. If this stuff isn't going away, there's also,
Yeah.
You have the conversation of, yeah, we could tap in, we can solve it with free cash. We can, tap into stabilization. I'm
Yeah.
not putting,
Yeah.
disparaging, putting any of that in. But there's also got to be an acknowledgement that you can't do that more than once.
Right.
But if that
Well,
buys
and
you
that
time
gives
to,
you the
Right, but
time
it's
without an override.
Right, but,
Yeah.
but
With the quantifiable.
but it's a,
that buys us time to go to the state.
Yeah.
To sit and let
Right,
them,
and
gives
see-
them time to do something.
right,
Right.
Potentially.
But I mean, if you know you used 600,000 of free cash and you used.
Right.
200,000, 250,000 stabilization, you know you need $1 million to backfill this. And that gives you a number for a well thought out campaign to get the million from the state. or
What's the state
otherwise.
surplus right now? 2 billion?
Well, no,
Oh, it's more than that.
I
It's
just, I know
comical that
they-
we're having this discussion.
I just know in the world of preschool funding, which is work, they talk about doing another round of ARPA grants in July, because I'm. Yeah, for preschool funding for the early ed. So I don't know if they're gonna do it or not, but that's on the table for discussion. So I don't know if there'll be more discussions of this nature at that point too.
yeah. I mean,
I know.
it's possible that we're gonna get some number of extraordinary relief at some point.
Yeah.
But I don't think.
You
it's
can't
before-
depend on it.
Right,
No.
it's
That
not,
would
it's
be
not,
great.
Yeah.
but it's not
I'm
gonna be
not-
before May 3rd, like.
No.
I didn't build a budget, I didn't build a budget at work counting on it.
Right.
No, you can't.
But,
Right.
but,
Can't depend on an operational override.
no,
If you're going to do a senior center,
No.
and a school and, you know,
Gotta figure it out.
no, I'm not saying depend on, I'm saying it's got, if that's the discussion that has to be had, that's the discussion that has to be had.
For the new revenue growth numbers, are there multiple variables to get to over the next 3 weeks? Are there certain areas that can be guesstimated so we can have a target number in a week and then refine to 2 weeks out, so we can have a general sense of what we're gonna be facing 3 weeks out?
I think the biggest variable in there is the new growth, is trying to figure out what number that is, and the select board will ultimately have to make a decision on what they're gonna go forward with on the new growth estimates. The finance director puts together her estimate, and then I think there was some discussion last year, and the board increased that a couple $100,000.
No, I
Um,
think it was only.
150?
I think it was 50,000.
Okay,
50 per kid.
I was
So-
arguing for much more.
okay, yes, I think,
Well,
yeah.
And I may be doing that again.
all right, I just want to caution everybody, the new growth is not a number that you should take lightly, because it is certified by the state and it's not certified until September. It's all based on the sales within your community and what's being built in the community. So even though we've had historically high new growth over the last 3 years, remember,
It's long.
6 years ago, you were at 293,000 a year for new growth. So I would be hesitant as to thinking that's gonna be your savior in this situation.
Well,
I
What
was
did we
clear though, what did we
Yeah.
estimate last year? What did we estimate last
We
year?
estimated 800,000, it came
And what
in
did
at 1.5 million. That was because you had exceptional growth last year. You had the assisted living facility came in, I believe, at 7 million in the,
That was
thing.
fees.
So, no, that wasn't fees. That was, that's the assessed value at that point. So, I have already had the discussion with the assessor. I already have the number that she feels comfortable putting in the budget. And so that's something that we'll discuss with the select board, and then you can make your, recommendations. But I would caution everybody that,
Don't count on
economies change, things change, and it's better to have a little bit of money in your free
But
cash
what you
at
can
the end
count
of
on,
the
what you
day.
can count on is that 1.5 million that came in unexpectedly is now going to definitely come in taxation.
Well, it was
next year.
800, it was 800,000 that came in extra, because we already had 800 in there in the
Okay,
budget.
so that 800,000 that came in extra is definitely going to hit taxation this year. So that's 800,000 more in
Right.
taxation for sure.
Right.
And then, so there's a number in there that
Right.
But I also think part of it is we deal with, every year we're dealing with the estimates and unknown health insurance, and we don't know what the state's gonna really do. We get the governor's cherry sheet, and that's a best case scenario, and we build assumptions in. Again, given the magnitude of what we're talking about, I think we gotta get something, so we know what ballpark we're talking.
That's right.
What ballpark are we in? Are we in, override ballpark, or are we in, okay, maybe there's a way we get through this year? But we need to get there sooner than later. That's my ask.
right, and we can get those numbers. As soon as we get an estimate, we can start talking about it and see.
When do you think, just to, from a,
I think I just heard we could have something possibly next week as an early look, but
Yeah, we could send something, we'll send something out sometime next week, before the end of next week, so that
because we have
people
our
can
next
start.
meeting is the 28th, and this is when we're gonna start our, it's a budget working session.
Yeah,
So
it'll
we
be,
have a
it'll
meeting
be,
on the
Yeah, we're
27th.
the selectmen meet on the 27th, so it'll
We'll have
be
the
prior to the
information
28th.
It would be very helpful.
Maybe to ask some numbers of somebody other than Carol, because she's been on the hot seat a little bit, nothing she can't handle. What is the capital planning committee looking at, if anything, so far for critical requests? I know you haven't
we
graded
really
them
haven't
yet.
gotten into those.
Yeah, I can-
Tomorrow night, by the way.
We do.
We
Zoom.
have those.
Yeah, okay.
There's about 14 requests, but we haven't had content and conversation.
And a
yet.
lot of them are
Prioritize.
our enterprise fund items. too.
Yeah, a
Some
lot
of
of
that's not
CPW
directly
things.
related to this, so.
Is it capital meeting tomorrow?
I thought it was the 23rd.
I thought it was, I thought, I didn't have it on my calendar.
No, the next one's the 23rd.
Yeah.
Everyone knows.
Good night, John.
Just so
Good night,
excited.
Bob.
Not tomorrow.
You really scared me for a minute.
Good night, Bob. So I will say that we have, I have a rough list of all the submittals. And currently, the full list of general fund requests totals about 300,000. And it doesn't mean they're all gonna get approved or recommended for funding, but that's the.
Is
full
there anything
request.
on there that you would say that the requester is saying have to have it?
All of them.
Condition of failure.
The only
They'll be in
thing
there all
that-
night.
Like, that.
Yeah,
The
either
only thing
zero
that
or
we
a nine.
haven't broached yet with the capital planning committee is we're having an overall evaluation of our HVAC currently.
Oh, I didn't.
I don't know what the number's gonna come to. Our units right here are gonna have to get repaired. to the
Didn't we vote
building.
HVAC last year?
Our HVAC is a major
It's-
problem,
it's-
and it's gonna be
more
a
than last
pretty
year.
big number.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just letting you know, I'm waiting to get the actual number, but it is.
Long time.
Could that be?
Yeah, so we are looking around
CPC
300 to 350,000 for cap.
Yeah.
That's the way you think.
Well, we used to point between 400,000 from them.
We did replace the chiller coils recently. That was funded at the fall town meeting, but we do have some pretty major internal things going on as well.
But she said maybe the CT.
Something, I don't know. But I mean, there could be other funding, but I'm just kind of throwing that out there because it came up.
We don't have anything currently on the HVAC, I don't see here. But most of the items, there's a few DPW items, there's an aerial boom lift, we're looking for town buildings, that's a $45,000 item. We've got 2 school items, data center upgrade with servers, 45,000, school wireless upgrade at 68,000. And then some small items, so it equals around 350,000. Again, if that's if they're all approved.
They're upgrades, they're not needed.
So, you know, some of them
Repairs
are,
are needed.
they're useful,
You
um,
understand?
but
Words
it's
matter.
all weighed priority.
So at this point, we have to wait for some numbers, right?
Right.
And we're going to, the school committee's gonna put together a letter. And then based off of that, I'm also putting together a letter that we'll send to the governor and our other representatives. I'm also gonna reach out to some other area, select boards and see if we can get some cohesiveness going with other letters being written. And I'm sure they'll do the same with other school committees. Just so that if there's, you know, for lack of a better term, I guess a Hail Mary to try to
Sure.
get some kind of
What about
money.
We gotta carry it out.
Yeah.
What about
Madam
letters
Chair?
from the? Sorry.
Oh, do you think you could post something that people could write
That's what I.
and say?
Right, that's what I was
This,
gonna
so
say.
we're all saying the same thing, not like, oh, we're short 2 million and someone else says 4 million, so.
Yeah, I think once we get a letter
Concise.
together, maybe I could share like
Yeah.
a version of that letter so that
Right.
people
Yeah.
could also
And
send some.
could there also, since it's the school, the parents of the school, of the population, the parents of the schools, could, if a collective letter coming from the parents and the teachers,
May not be a bad idea, I guess.
I mean.
I wanna advocate for the schools and to our elected officials in the governor's office before. I'll speak for the schools and I'm only one of 5. Before we start a letter writing campaign, I really wanna know what this impact looks like. Right? I
Oh,
wanna,
I understand that, but what I'm saying is if you're looking for, say, if you find what the impact is, and it's a huge deficit, which already, obviously we know it is. Letters, numbers, impact, and if a huge amount of the community population sends letters to these people, they're gonna take it
I was only
seriously.
concerned about the timing because I wanna be, I don't wanna speak in nebulous terms. I think we really have to get to the point where we know what our impact is and what the issue is.
So we'll need to we'll start off with those main letters and, you know,
Exactly.
where we end up, and if that's something that works out, I'm sure we can get a template together, if that's a campaign we're gonna go down.
I agree.
Okay.
I just think the important part is whatever we decide this year buys us this year. This is
That's
the,
right.
this is the patch, get through it, and then it's gotta be solved. There is no systemic solution
Well,
that
and
can
that,
come out
that's
of.
where the longer term piece of going to the legislature,
Right.
like, you know, their talk about they're advocating to, you know, increase the, right now, circuit breaker doesn't kick in till 4 times the average cost of the proposal is to bring it down. The proposal is to take it from 75% of the additional cost up to 90. The long-term plan is, the long-term impact is getting them to actually, well, 1, vote to change the formula, 2, then to actually fund what they say they're gonna pay, because we're barely getting 75% of what we're supposed to get now, so, I think it's,
Are you getting 75% of the 10%?
no, you get 75%. The formula is you get 75% of the cost above, which is, but not until it hits, what is it, 3 or 4 times the average. So until it hits like $50,000, we don't get anything, and then we only get 75% of the incremental cost above that number.
So right now, the cost per pupil is $56,288. For example, a student costing $65,000, you take off the 56,288 equals 8712 times 75%. So we're only getting $6,534 for circuit breaker, 10%.
Per student?
If that, at that
Per
student's
student.
rate. if that's-
Right.
That's the
And the formula
Yeah.
stays the same, so pretty much that's how it works out.
4 times the average.
The state gives us 10% of the cost of a student, and the municipality is responsible for 90.
And you have 20 students?
We have 20 students. We have 20 students in district and then the people going out of district and even retiring, we're basically staying at 20 for now.
Mhm.
I know I've said this before, but a moving could come in,
Mhm.
a moving could come in the summer or.
Sure.
So, but right now, where we stand here tonight, 20 this year, 20 next year.
All right, so, so at this point, I'm gonna suggest we move on.
Please.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is the continued collaboration between municipal and school departments. And I think, obviously, in light of everything, we can say that that's quite important. We've started off with facilities, sharing some facilities with, I think Mr. Kaczynski can speak a little bit more towards. And a few other items that the school committee and the select board will work towards together to see if we're able to collaborate on some more services.
Yes, thank you. This has certainly been a success story. The facilities, we've been working with John Engler and his custodial crew. We had a lot of problems in the municipal buildings with having good custodial service, and our custodial service has never been better. And it's going very well. I think it's going to continue to go well, and want to thank the administration and the custodial staff and John for all his work. So I think it's also something we'd like to look at moving forward, to continue those discussions, to have other areas of opportunity where we can work together to improve service. And I think one thing we want to talk about, at least not necessarily for this coming year, but over the next year, talk about maybe looking at grounds maintenance, and as a way we can kind of share on that, where the DPW might have some resources that the school doesn't have directly, where might end up with cost savings in order to do that. So again, everyone's got their plate full for the next couple of months, but maybe over the summer we can start those discussions to look at
That's a good idea.
future years. And certainly we're open to any thoughts or ideas that the school committee or administration has, as far as other ways we can, collaborate for efficiencies and just work together. So
I would only add, and I would say, kicking it down, send it to a committee. IT.
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But I like the grounds thing, because I think there's some confusion on who has jurisdiction over stuff, but that's just me. I mean, I don't know if that's just passing the hat, it's, they were supposed to do it. No, they were supposed to do it. So I think the grounds thing is a no-brainer.
And you're saying add IT into the discussion.
I think if we're having a discussion about IT, we should, or shared services,
Yeah.
it may not work out,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
had that,
but at
Mike,
least have
right?
that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're very open to looking at. I mean, it could be something as simple as, backing each other up, in certain situations, or working together, and maybe some cross-training on the different programs and systems. Up until recently, we really didn't have any paid professional IT staff in-house on the municipal side. We do have a part-time person. We're trying to look to make that person full-time. It's something that those discussions will be happening over the next couple of months in light of the broader budget picture. But no matter what happens there, I think there's room for collaboration on that front. So,
Do you have a full-time IT?
We have multiple.
Yeah.
You have a whole department?
We were just going over, we had a presentation. I don't know exactly how many devices. We have several hundred devices. All of the schools from 2nd through 12 have a one-to-one device. So just the amount of resources necessary just to support the device, those devices on top of all the other devices and the networks. Several people.
Okay,
so, and I think the cooperation generally between the municipal administration and school administration has been just growing stronger and stronger over the past at least 5 or 6 years. And that has continued, with Bob and Terry coming on board. So I think the communication is better than probably it's ever been. So just want to let everyone know that on this level, we're all working together well and trying to get things done and help each other out.
From the budget perspective, is it working out for the school? The whole intent of doing it, I mean, it's great to hear the kumbaya and everybody's tight and, collaborating, but from a budget perspective, is it panning out the way?
Well,
we all
I'll jump
hoped and
in, I'll
intended?
jump in just a little bit to say that, you know, when we first discussed it, we looked at this as a trial year. So there may be some tweaking needed. I mean, there were a few things that weren't figured in. You know, the DPW building and the scope of that wasn't fully figured in, as well as some of the overtime requirements that we have. So I do expect to have some discussions with the administration about some tweaking on their, you know, their costs for their staff. So we haven't gotten to that point yet, but I imagine within the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be talking about that as well. Yeah.
And I've never looked at this as a huge cost saver. I mean, it's gonna save money, but not $1.3 million is a cheap number I'm picking up here. But,
Start saying 1.4.
yeah.
Make it easier.
It's not gonna save that much money, but it dramatically increases quality of service. It makes it less redundant, and it does save something. And I think the partnership is the important part, and the quality at no extra cost can dramatically improve quality is what it sounds like.
The cost shouldn't go up.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's
Oh, God.
stabilized.
Ideally.
That would be bad.
Yeah, it stabilized things, and it did save something.
We all like each other, but we're spending more money.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're not spending more money, just not saving $1.4 million.
That's correct.
Well, we've only just started. Give it a couple of years, we'll save it.
That's all I had on that. I mean, certainly if anyone else wants to talk about that, but I just wanted to bring that up. Kind of a light topic compared to what you just went through, but I'll throw that out there.
Does anybody have any
Thank
more
you.
comments on that, or we're good?
No, I think we should, we're committed to looking at whatever we can do. Forget town and school, it's the town.
Together,
It's
yes,
the town.
right.
The only thing
Big
I
two.
want to do is find one company where we all buy our paper towels from. That's my whole goal here. One company, you get, because we'll, you know, we'll get the,
Quantity discount.
yeah, there's another word for it.
Yeah.
Economies of scale.
So Ellen, we are.
Economies of scale.
We are looking at that.
Ellen, we're looking at that.
Okay.
Since John and I would, we can look at a lot of this, a lot of these efficiencies, and trying to
So-
figure out what's what, so we're getting there.
At some point, you know, down the road, just as you said, it would be whether it's John and Mike or John and Karen get together and have a cup of coffee and go through the common services and, you know, HVAC, elevator maintenance. You already talked about IT and grounds maintenance, but there's HR, there's other common functions amongst two huge budgets that you can
Yes.
get economy of scale.
True.
That stuff
And
is
we are, we're
on the mental
absolutely
list.
researching all of those options because it is really important.
And you can't do them all at once. So
No.
the
No,
point
it's a
is,
slow process.
get the list and then
It's a slow
prioritize.
process,
Paper
but
towels.
we're moving that way. Starting yet, first Ellen.
Yes.
$1.3 million stuff.
To be surprised.
We already talked about paper clips. so. Paper clips and paper towels. Yep.
All right, so the,
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
the next thing we had was the townwide social worker update and discussion, and I think Mr. Kaczynski has some information. from-
Yeah, I mean, I think that as well falls under the collaboration. You know, heading as far as the townwide social worker, it's something that a couple of years ago, you know, the school administration had brought up, and we worked together over time to have that included under the HCA funds. Everything I've heard, that's going very well. And that's currently going to be submitted as part of the HC funds again. And I think, you know, I don't know if anyone else has anything to say on that, but I think it's going very well.
So I mentioned to this offline. She came, the social worker came and presented to the school. She is excellent.
Yeah, she's been.
So I'm gonna be very careful because I started the meeting with Beth. We need more social workers in town.
We do.
She was excellent. If she has not presented to the Board of Selectmen, I would have her come in.
She did.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
She was really good. And she was really talking about a lot of the issues, and a lot of the issues are at home and really kind of having a side impact on the school. It's not necessarily, I think probably we thought that she'd be focusing in a lot on the schools. I think it's a holistic approach to dealing with problems that are in the home that impact the school or potentially school to home, but she's really busy. And we asked her, just understanding what the state we're in, what is the ideal staffing? And she says 2 of me, meaning 2 full-time people, almost day and night. And I know we had a long discussion about this, but I think what we can't lose in the big picture is that she is providing services that are having lasting impacts and helping prevent further things in more tragic things and helping maintain. So I know we're not in a position to fund 2 full-time social workers, but I think as we sit here and talk and think about big picture, I think that's that service that she provides. I'm glad that the town did it. I'm proud of this town for making that decision and finding the money and doing the right thing for every resident. Yeah,
We're not even in position to fund one.
I know.
And the next step is, that's all great anecdotal, you know, that it's worthwhile, but the data has to be there. We ought to be collecting the data now in terms of impact, so that when we run out of HCA funding, we're prepared to take it to the town and put it in the budget and make that determination if it gets into the budget. You know, whatever, 2 years down the road, I think there's 2 years left. Or whatever, I don't want to get into the formula and when the money shows up and when it, you know, but I think that's the important part of, if it's important and it's worthwhile, we need to make sure we're banking, you know, that we're doing the planning.
Well, I can say we are tracking that through the police department. I know the police chief is doing a good job tracking that information. I know he's in communication with the school in regards to their efforts. And so I think that's something that can be produced. So,
work in the schools is documented
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
She had some good information she presented to us. I think she's going to have good data.
Great.
She's not-
So the next thing was also from us, I believe, the additional municipal staff needs.
yeah, just to touch upon that, just so that everyone's aware of what we've been looking at. You know, the Council on Aging has certainly been understaffed for a number of years, and there's been a real need to increase the programming and staffing there. So there is a proposal for a new program operations manager, as well as trying to increase the hours of the center currently. So that's one area we're looking at. Also, the Department of Public Works, we had a study done about 4 years ago, and it did say we were 2 to 3 people below area towns. So we're trying to look at adding a laborer to the DPW. And we've also had a request from the police chief for 2 new police officers. That'll be, you know, he did a presentation to the select board when they had the budget meetings a couple weeks ago. And going back to the idea of trying to, you know, coordinate services with school and town, we are looking at increasing our department assistant in the office that's handling a lot of the HR, but wants to also try to pull in the entire system and help the schools with their onboarding. We know school has the majority of the employees, and we think it's important for a central office here to work with the schools and making sure that we got everything covered there. When someone comes on, they're properly registered and you know. So those are the main things we're looking at. There's some other minor things, but you know, that'll be discussed with the select board going forward as well as we get into the budget process and see what funds are available. So,
IT,
yes, the IT, we are looking at, right now, we have an IT person who works part-time here for 20 hours, part-time in Norfolk for 15. He's treading water. He's helping us with our things and keeping us moving. But we're trying to, you know, really jump into the 21st century with e-permitting, improving our other systems, trying to make us more efficient. In order to do that, you know, we think we need at least another 15 hours to make them 35 hours a week. So,
town engineer.
and a town engineer is being looked at as well. So
I'm just throwing it out.
you're throwing it up there, and that would be with the
Town engineer
DPW.
salary would be paid
A lot of that, yeah,
100%.
through the
Engineering.
through
services.
engineering services to
But
private
we now
entities.
have to pay for.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the IT director brings in a ton of grants
A
already.
ton of.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's 2 of them, to me, they're rather relatively revenue or expense neutral, but the other ones would be increases.
One thing I was just thinking as you guys were going through that list, is we talk predominantly to the legislature, we talk about trying to get this funding and the impact to schools and municipalities is, it's not just the schools. Because,
That's right.
you know, if not for this increase and the lack of funding from the state, the new growth, the extra 800,000 on top of what we had
Yeah.
budgeted, we'd be sitting here and the conversation would be, what are we adding and what are we not adding? And so it's not just the impact of, if we don't get this funding, the schools are gonna cut all this. It's that because we don't have the funding from the state, in addition to actually cutting, here are all the other things that, while they're not technically cuts because we don't have them, but it's the stuff we're not able to do. It's the, you know, staffing being, having department staff at levels that are supposed to be benchmark levels. So I think maybe as we go through this, we identify some of that stuff as well, is for the legislature, your lack of funding these things is not just a school problem. It's a complete municipal problem that touches across the entire town, all departments, all services, all residents.
I think you should draft that first letter.
Yeah.
I think you should draft that first letter. Because that's good.
That's a
You're
great
absolutely right.
question.
Absolutely right.
All in favor of Mark writing letter? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Give me a list of items.
No, it's a great point. no?
Very,
You said that a half hour ago.
that's good.
He said it more eloquently than I did.
Yeah.
With less emotion.
But same words.
It's true, though. Right, yeah.
It is. It's the village.
That is what we had on the agenda. Are there more comments on any additional, I mean, the whole first item on the agenda kind of
Suck
sort
the
of
life
changed
out of
everything
it.
else then.
Chair,
Yeah.
I had asked my chair, I didn't know, about, Jim Harden coming in to talk about Tri-County.
Oh.
performance of,
Yeah, Tri-County is supposed to do a presentation to us in the next
In-
couple meetings.
In March, March
March
13th, they're
13th.
coming in, so I would recommend that anyone's interested, and everyone should be interested, watch that. I will say, Madam Chair, if I may, just for those that aren't aware, the project, as currently proposed, is $280 million.
Is that it?
Tri-County.
Is that it?
Tri-County.
That's it.
Don't worry, they're getting
Unfortunately,
25% funding from the state.
the good news is it's an MSBA reimbursement project. The bad news, it's only 25% when everything is said and done. It's about 70 million funded by the state, 210 million by the district. Right now,
Where's it going?
Divided by 13.
No, I know it is, but where are they gonna
same
do?
spot, is it's gonna take up part of the parking lot, and then they're gonna tear down.
Knock
the
down
whole
this
bit,
Tri-
they're gonna knock down.
Tri-County, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the way the process works, my knowledge is at this time is they're planning a district-wide election on October 24th of this year. And the way that it works is that everyone in the district, all the voters in the district will vote on the same day at the same time. And they pool all the votes for the whole district. And if the district gets 50% plus one vote, it's approved. And if it's approved, then it'll go forward with the project. The towns will be assessed on an annual basis based on enrollment. And it's up to the town to figure out how to pay for it. So whether the town passes the debt exclusion or not, it's gonna be on the hook to pay for it.
Yes.
So that could be 450,000 a year or.
$8 million.
That's just.
8 million,
I'm sorry, yeah, that's.
we calculated
so the first
between
year would be twice
the
that.
total debt
Yeah.
for us would be between 8 to 13 million, depending upon the annual enrollment
So the
over those
payments
30
would be
years.
Almost $1 million the first year, falling to just, 500,000.
So that would
last
not be
year.
easily absorbable outside of a debt exclusion.
And how many students do you have going now?
Attleboro.
Right now, well, we're not sure. It's either 37 or 38.
Yeah, so
Um,
38.
Yeah, you have 37.
Yeah.
we'd almost have to go for debt exclusion, but the problem is it's a variable number. So it's not even like you can talk about it like the school.
What are the rules on how often you can go for a debt exclusion?
Well, every time there's an election.
Yeah.
I don't think there's
You
any-
can't do it, so there's no restrictions on consecutive years or anything like that, well,
No.
Doesn't mean it pass.
I understand.
Yeah.
But you're looking at potentially debt exclusions for multiple years, given what's on the horizon in Mills. We
Yeah, I
just
think
talked
that's-
about this senior center, high school, you know, there's a number of overrides.
And this one the most because it's not a true override vote. You can't even tell people it's gonna cost. We're just gonna, if it passes, and we're the smallest town, I think, in the voting block, if it passes, that's $1 million the first year. It's gonna hit operating budgets if we don't have an exclusion for it. Using a ballpark number, but let's
No,
be,
it's a, we're turning around saying you have to pass this override. Because if we don't, we're listing cuts and whatever else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
In fact, it's $280 million. And only 25, I mean, bad enough, at least if they were getting 50%.
Well, I saw some new fields on there, so. That's all excluded.
But like,
from-
that's
excluded from. the
excluded,
that's
override.
why they're getting 25%.
That's right, yeah. That's why the price is 280 and why it's 25%.
So for, let me just. We have 28 children going there.
38.
38.
It varies, but yeah.
13 million for, yeah.
Based,
38
yeah,
million.
it's based on, I think that was based on 60 students, which we had a couple years ago.
7, I think.
Yeah, somewhere close to that.
We
But-
should be closer to that 37.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I
so-
think it may be dropping next year too.
Yeah.
Chances are,
So Mike, so the number that you said was based on 60?
the 13 million was
Yeah.
based on 60.
Okay, but it,
The,
but
the,
it goes
the
by
current,
enrollment.
the 8 million is based on the current enrollment,
Right.
but that can fluctuate
I know.
all over the place, so.
And that's why it's impossible.
Did you get some hammers and wrenches
Well,
over
that's-
there?
wait,
under your roof?
If we have renovations to the new building, we can add a shop. So, I mean, Tri-County is absolutely the right school for some
I
kids.
know.
Yeah.
But there are some kids that, we could
Right.
service better in Millis if we had an option for that type of
Yeah.
stuff. Not that it's a complete vocation
No,
program, but
something,
something, yeah.
Right. especially for the kids that want both.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Used to be like that when we were.
Yes, it was. Unfortunately, they didn't let me take shop. I had to learn how to sew and that went well. As we can all imagine.
My wife, I don't work.
See that visual right there?
My wife.
Oh, those needles go.
Well.
Right. So does anybody have anything else?
I think we have enough.
Yeah.
That's good. I gotta leave that.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
You have to do that separately.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned.
Motion to adjourn for the school committee? Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I'll move, we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you
Deirdre.
very much,
Thank you.
everyone.
Oh, you're welcome.
First year.
Apparently,
Yeah.
Yes.
What was the budget?